I'm going to show you how to begin the loop in a Celtic cable knot, a Celtic knot cable. This loop here at the bottom of this Celtic knot cable, this loop starts with an increase at the bottom of the loop here. And the increase is an increase, in this case, from no stitches to 4 stitches. In all the established methods that I've come across, this increase is formed from a stitch in the preceding row or round, or from the strand between stitches. Whereas the increases in the method that I've developed don't use any stitches or the strand between stitches to make that increase. I'm going to show you how to do it. I think this produces a neater result than any of the methods that I have come across for beginning this loop. So I've used this method I've developed in all the cables on this Celtic cabled hoodie from the book I'm working on at the moment, which is Cable Knits. So I've got some knitting ready here. There are the 6 stitches here. Now in this cable here, 2 rounds, this is knitted in the round, 2 rounds after forming the increase, the stitches from the increase are cabled. 2 of them in this knot, 2 of them are cabled over 1 stitch in this direction, 1 purl stitch, they cross in front of a purl stitch in this direction, and the other 2 stitches cross over in front of 3 purl stitches in this direction. However, in the piece that I'm going to demonstrate this with, we will go on to cable some so that we can see how it looks after the cabling, but I'm going to just cross 2 over 2 at both sides. So this is how to begin. I'm going to purl to the middle of this row, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then I'm going to start. So here we are. It starts with a yarn over, so I'm taking the yarn over the working needle, and then I insert the passive needle in between the yarn over and the stitch that preceded the yarn over, so that the passive needle has been pushed through between the yarn over and the stitch that precedes it, and now that yarn over, the yarn comes up behind the passive needle, over the working needle, and down behind the passive needle again. So it's forming a loop over the working needle, and then I wrap the yarn round the passive needle and pull it through to the front, so that now we've formed 2 stitches. I'm just going to put a bit of tension on the working yarn there to pull things tight. So now this stitch is the one that we've just pulled through, and this stitch here was the yarn over, and I'm going to pass that yarn over stitch to the passive needle. And now our next stitch is just like a standard cable cast on stitch. We're going to poke the point of the working needle through between those 2 stitches. Those are the 2 stitches we've just made, the new stitches, the increases. Wrap the yarn as in a standard knit stitch, pull it back through to the front, and then we've got 3 stitches. And I'm going this stitch now at the point of the passive needle, the first stitch on the passive needle, that is the stitch still that was the yarn over at the beginning of the increase, and I'm going to pass that, I'm going to return it to the working needle. So now these 2 new stitches on the working needle, I'm going to, this is like at the beginning of the increase, I'm going to put the passive needle through between those 2 stitches, the first 2 stitches on the working needle. And I think you might have seen then I had to start poke it through twice so that I didn't catch a strand from either of the stitches. The point of the needle has gone through right between those two stitches, the first two stitches on my working needle. And then wrap the yarn up over the point of the passive needle. This is like knitting backwards. This is how left-handers knit. And I'm going to pull that stitch through to the front. The yarn that we've just wrapped around the passive needle, we've pulled it through to the front, so that now indeed we've got 4 stitches. This is like a little tree increase, alternating stitches on the 2 needles, so that now we've made 4 new stitches, and we're going to pass these 2 stitches back from the passive needle to the, well, not back, because this one we've only just made. We're going to pass that to the working needle, and then this final stitch on the passive needle, we're going to pass that to the working needle by slipping it through the back loop. So I'm going to take the working needle through behind the back leg of that stitch on the passive needle and slip it that way to the working needle. And there we have it. We've got 4 new stitches on the working needle. Now they're quite snug up against that following stitch there, but you'll find probably in the following row or round that things loosen up and we end up with a strand between the increases and the stitch that preceded them. And indeed, although I'm going to work this stitch tight and pull some of that looseness through into the following stitch and keep a tight grip on the yarn, good strong tension on the working yarn, so that this stitch is snug up next to them. And I'm going to carry on to the end of the row, purl the rest of the stitches in the row. But even though I've done that, I anticipate, because I have enough experience to know this is what's going to happen, that in the following row some looseness is going to develop between the increases and the stitches to either side of the increases. So let's watch that happen. Now if you were working in the round, you would just work back round to those increases. So you would work purl to the increases and then knit the increases, but we're working them from the wrong side, so we're doing this in flat knitting. So I'm going to knit to the increases and then I'm going to purl the increases. I'm going to do it a little bit carefully, trying not to pull much yarn through, but despite all my efforts you can now see that a strand has developed there, that some looseness has travelled through into the strand between the stitch that precedes the increases and the increases. Nevertheless, let's purl. Because of the way the increases are organised, we can't pull that looseness through into this first stitch. The first stitch isn't attached to that strand. So I'm going to purl the 4 increases. And here we have it. Now you can see the looseness, that despite all my efforts, there's some looseness there at both sides of the increases. However, we can deal with this looseness here by pulling it through into this stitch that follows. So I'm working all that looseness through the following stitches, and gradually I'll pull less and less of it through so that it's distributed through the following stitches. So now I've turned and things are indeed now nice and snug there, and there's just that looseness there to deal with. And we're going to deal with that one, that's the looseness there between the increases and the stitch that follows them. I'm going to just put my needle through into the purl bump on the stitch that follows it and pull that through a few of the neighbouring stitches less and less as I go, so that it gradually gets distributed through those subsequent stitches. There, that'll do it. Right then, so now we're going to work along this row. Now this is the row in which in most stitch patterns you would now do the cabling. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cable 2 over 2, both half of those 4 stitches. 2 of them are going to come in this direction over 2 stitches, and the other 2 are going to go in that direction over the following 2 stitches. So I'm going to purl 4. Now I'm cabling without a needle. There are plenty of tutorials available for how to do this. I know that even though I've reached some purl stitches, because I'm going to cross these 2 stitches in front of the purl stitches, the next 2 stitches that I work are going to be knit stitches, so I've taken the yarn to the back. So I'm going to insert my needle into, I'm skipping over these 2 purl stitches to insert my working needle into the first 2 knit stitches from the front. So I've inserted my working needle into those 2 knit stitches from in front, and then I'm going to carefully slip the 2 purl stitches that preceded them off the needle, and I'm going to pull my passive needle back through the knit stitches and take it behind the needle to insert it back into those purl stitches. So now I've swapped the order of those 4 stitches, and I'm going to return the knit stitches to the passive needle. There they are at the front. Now we've reordered those 4 stitches so that here are the 2 knit stitches. Knit 2, purl 2, and then we're going to cable the opposite way. This time I want to take these 2 purl stitches behind these knit stitches. Because of the order of the stitches, I'm going to have to take my working needle into those purl stitches from behind. There they are. I've inserted my working needle through those two purl stitches from behind. I've skipped over the 2 knit stitches that preceded them, and I'm going to remove my passive needle through all 4 stitches and then bring it round to the front, and from in front insert it back through those knit stitches, and then pass the purl stitches back to the passive needle. So all I've done is I've rearranged the stitches on my passive needle, and there I am, ready to purl. So purl 2, knit 2, and then I'm going to purl to the end of the row. Right, let's have a look. Here it is. There's the beginning of our Celtic cable loop, and it looks quite nice and neat, I think you'll agree. I'm very happy with that. I'll just do one more row so we can look at how that's developing. So this is the resting row. It would be a resting round if you're working in the round. It's a wrong side row if you're working flat. So I've just purled the cable stitches, knit the stitches that are between the cables, then purl the other two cable stitches and knit to the end of the row. Now turn and let's have a look at it. There we go. You can see these purl stitches emerging between the strands of the cables. That looks pretty good. Later on, these are the from the wrong side row. I think these that's a bit loose there, I might pull some of that looseness through into the neighbouring knit stitch, and same on the other side. I might or I might not, depending on how it looks after I've worked a bit further on. But I think the base of this Celtic loop cable is quite neat and stands out nicely from the work independently. There it is. Thank you very much.